Hello, Packer fans, and it's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast, brought to you by fans for fans. Please give us a like and subscribe. We're really trying to get up to 5,000 subs before the start of the NFL season, and we're on a good pace to get there with a lot of great NFL talk coming your way well before the start of the season. So I think 5,000 is definitely achievable. So let's get a like and subscribe. Would really appreciate it. As we try to grow this channel. Got some exciting news and notes today. Some information about training camp, some information about the Lions, who are really seeing significant lack of continuity, which is a big thing the Packers have going for us this year. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then I'm going to jump into some training camp battles to watch in minicamp and in training camp that are going to have a huge impact on your Green Bay Packers. So let's get into it. First of all, news and notes. The Lions are looking like a team that are going to regress this year, and it's looking more and more like the Lions have really hit their ceiling with their team last year, and there's so many things that are going to bring the Lions back down to earth this year that I think it's going to be very interesting. By the way, the Lions are still favored in most of the sports books out there to win the division. If you're a gambler and you have an opportunity to put some money on the Packers to win the division this year, you're probably going to have the best odds of the year because the Packers are still number 2 as far as most likely to win the division in 2025. And I think the news that we're going to talk about right now really increases the chances that the Green Bay Packers are going to be your NFC North champions this year. So let's give you a quick rundown on some of the things that the Lions are dealing with right now. They have a significant brain drain. They have 8 coaches, including the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, that have left the team. 8 coaches. In previous videos, I talked about the continuity of the Packers coaching staff being a strength. There's no question that this brain drain of 8 coaches from the Lions is a significant impact. It's even more so because Dan Campbell acts as a CEO type of coach. And what I mean by that is Dan Campbell is not the coordinator for an offensive or defensive side. Like with the Packers, Matt LaFleur, the offense is his baby. And you know that as long as you have your head coach, your offensive coordination is going to be up to par because the coach runs the offense. With the Lions, that is not the case with their head coach. He was a overall manager, and he let his defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator manage their side of the ball. With the Lions losing both their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator, you don't have that solidifying force of, well, our coach is handling one side of the ball. You don't have that with Dan Campbell. Because, look, I love Dan Campbell's passion. I love his enthusiasm. I love the fact that he is a rough and tough coach. He's never been a huge mastermind for an offense or defense. He's always been that raw. He went from being a position coach to a head coach like that. He was never a coordinator. So Dan Campbell not being the head of one side of the ball is a huge factor in the fact that the coaching staff for the Lions is basically starting from scratch. The O-line, and this was the news that came out yesterday, is in big trouble for the Detroit Lions. And if you look at the games last year, the running game really made the Detroit Lions an exceptional team because they could play off, play action, and make big plays down the field. But right now, the offensive line for the Detroit Lions is in big trouble because Kevin Zettler left for Tennessee. He had one good year in his I mean, he was always a solid offensive lineman, but he had a great year last year. He cashed it out, left for Tennessee. We learned yesterday that Frank Ragnow, their great center, is now retiring due to injuries. And this was just announced yesterday, which means the team didn't have the offseason, free agency, or the draft to replace Frank Ragnow. Obviously, they have been drafting players for their offensive line, but they didn't anticipate that Frank was going to be leaving this year. So to find that out in June is a big problem because Frank Ragnow made the offensive coverage line calls, and he's gone now. Now you're going to be looking at the interior of that offensive line and reshaping it between June and September with very little to work with. You don't have any free agents of note that are available. The draft has passed, and there just isn't a lot of getting more players to fill those holes other than what's already on the roster. So what's most likely to happen with the Lions right now is Graham Glasgow, who was a below average guard, is now going to move to center. So it's a new position. And then they have to bring in players with very little playing experience and put them at the 2 guard spots. So you're going to have a brand new center who's learning the position and how to make the calls. That's the big thing, is the center has to help make those blocking calls for the whole offensive line. So Glasgow has to learn how to do that. They've got 2 young guards that are coming in to be replacements. And there goes a lot of your depth in the offensive line as well, because you're having people that were depth players moving into the starting lineup. Where's your depth going to be for this offensive line? Now, they do still have 2 great tackles on the sides, but you have to remember, in the NFL, most of your running success comes from your interior offensive line. Your guards have to pull and block, and your center has to make the right calls for the running game and for the blocking protection for the running back plays. And if the interior of the offensive line for the Lions suddenly becomes a major liability, you're not going to have as many big plays in the running game. You're not going to have as much consistent success. If the center of the offensive line is clogged up, then the running backs are going to have to try to bounce outside the tackles or just try to grind out whatever yardage they can get in the middle. So that's a significant change for the Lions, because suddenly their play action is not going to be as effective. You're going to have defensive linemen penetrating through that weak interior offensive line now and getting in your quarterback's face. And we know from experience that Jared Goff historically is a bad quarterback when he's under pressure. So things are not looking good for the Detroit Lions in June right now. Another way to look at that is, as soon as this news broke, I went to go check the odds for our Week 1 game against the Detroit Lions. 3 weeks ago, the Packers at home were 1.5-point underdogs for Week 1. As soon as this news hit, they became 1.5-point favorites at home for Week 1. So that's a field goal switch just on the news that the center retired. So this is really big news. And I think I already felt that Week 1 was the week for us to get a win against the Lions. And I think this is even more important with this news, because they're going to have a newly reorganized offensive line with some questionable players in the interior having their first start together in an NFL game on the road at Lambeau Field. So if there was ever a time where the crowd could really have a huge impact, it's going to be Week 1 on the road against the Green Bay Packers. that interior offensive line is going to be in a world of hurt. And I think this is where we can see the Packers actually rally and roll out a very good win against the Lions to start the season. Now, the Lions are a good team, and I do think they will figure out their offensive line. But my concern is, for the Lions, it's great for the Packers. My concern is early in the season, the Lions are really going to struggle with their adjustment to their new coaching staff and now a new offensive line that has to be put together out of spare parts. I really think the Lions are going to struggle early in the year. And the fact that the sports books have already changed who's going to win that game by 3 points, that's a pretty significant move in June before training camp. I'm really excited about that week 1 game. So you gamblers out there, I would jump. You should have already jumped on week 1. I actually have the Packers with a 1.5 point advantage for week 1 because I thought they were going to win week 1 regardless. But now, jump on that now because I do expect that spread to actually get closer to 3 points for the Packers before week 1. So jump on that. But I really like the Packers to win the division right now. They're still the underdog to win the division. And I think that is easy money if you want to pick the Packers to win the NFC North this year. Because the Lions struggling opens the door wide open for the Packers to take the division this year. The Lions have to reconfigure. The Bears are adjusting to a new coaching staff and a new team as well. The Vikings have to get a new starting quarterback with no experience up to speed. All 3 of those teams, I think, are going to struggle early in the season, which is a great opportunity for the Packers to take this division early. So I'm very excited to see what happens there. So I think the Lions are very likely to regress, and it could get ugly because their first week test is week 1 is on the road against the Green Bay Packers, and that offensive line is going to be hearing it from Packers fans. I'll be there for week 1, and I know that place is going to be rocking. Number 1, it's the first home game start they've had in 8 years. Number 2, it's against the Lions, and any Packers fans know we have to have success against the Lions to win the division this year. And number 3, that offensive line is going to get their first full start, assuming they don't have any further injuries, on week 1 against the Green Bay Packers. So I'm really excited about it. So next update I have is training camp is starting to firm up. I'm very excited. I will be there for training camp and the owners' meetings. So I'll be reporting to you from training camp and from the owners' meetings at the end of July. So what do we have on tap? So the schedule is still in flux. We don't have any times for when these practices are going to be, but generally the Packers are going to practice in the morning where it's cooler, and then they could do their film study and stuff indoors in the afternoon. So first practice for the full training camp is going to be July 23rd. That will be open to the public. There's going to be another practice that will be on July 25th before the owners meeting. Now I'm interested to see if that practice is going to be for owners only because it's right before the owners meeting on the 25th at 3 p.m. So we know there's going to be a training camp practice on July 23rd. There's going to be one on the 25th. I don't know if that's going to be open to all the public or maybe just the owners. We'll have to see. So I think it's very likely that there will be a practice on the 24th, even though the schedule hasn't come out yet. I think it makes sense for them to practice the 23rd, 24th, 25th, then have the owners meeting. And I will be there for all of those practices. So very excited to see that. And I'll also be there for the owners meeting, which I think is going to be very historic. And you'll notice I'm going to be really invested in the Green Bay Packers this year personally. I'm going to go to training camp. I'm going to the owners meeting. I'm going to go to week 1 in Green Bay because I am feeling such a momentum for this team that I want to be there as much as possible. So I'm very excited to share that with you. So I'll be sharing training camp news and notes. I'll be sharing information and thoughts from the owners meeting. All those things are going to be live on site for your Pack Attack cast. So very excited about that. Now let's talk about our main topic for today. Major training camp battles to watch in OTAs and training camp that will shape this team in a big way. Our theme, iron sharpens iron. When you look at these training camp fights, it is good players playing against good players, and the cream will rise to the top. And not only is that going to give us great starters at the positions we're going to talk about, but it's going to give us the foundation, the depth from these competitions. The guy that doesn't win the competition probably could be a starter on another team, and he'll be ready to jump up and do his part for the Green Bay Packers. So, hold on. So, sorry, I hit my mic there. Just wanted to make sure we were not turned off. That would be a shame. All right, so let's go to the offensive line first. I have Sean Ryan versus Anthony Belton for right guard. The winner will be a key component of the offensive line, and the loser will be a key backup. My prediction is Sean Ryan will be your starter in 2025 based on his solid play and the desire to have continuity, but he won't be back in 2024, and Belton will be your future right guard next year. In the meantime, you've got Sean Ryan as your starter. You're going to have Anthony Belton strengthened due to camp battles, and Anthony Belton is going to be a key component of depth for this offensive line. He could play tackle, he could play guard, and the training camp battle is only going to make him a key contributor for depth for this offensive line. So next up we have Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan for left tackle. The winner will be a key component of the offensive line, and loser will be a key backup. This is going to be a huge battle for a couple of reasons. Rasheed Walker is an established starter at left tackle, but I think Jordan Morgan is going to be given every chance to win that job because he was a first-round draft pick last year, and Rasheed Walker is on the last year of his contract. It's very likely he will not be back next year. So it's important to get the best player out in your starting lineup and to have a key backup for left tackle. So I think this is too close to call. I do think Jordan Morgan will be given every chance to win the job, with the team clearly showing their hand to move from Walker in 2026. Morgan will definitely be your starter either this year or next year. And if Rasheed Walker does maintain his starting job, it will be for 2025, and he will leave as a free agent in 2026, which means Jordan Morgan will become your starter at left tackle. It's just a question of whether it will be sooner, 2025, or later, 2026. Overall, these offensive line battles show the true strength of the squad. The players that don't win these starting roles would probably be starters for other NFL teams. The Green Bay Packers are one of our true strengths is the offensive line, and the additions that we had this offseason is only going to cement the fact that we are going to have an offensive line that has two solid lines available, which is going to allow us to deal with injuries, illnesses. It's also going to have us have significant depth in the event that there's a serious injury for this offensive line. Contrast that to what we talked about earlier with the Lions. They're taking players with no experience, throwing them into the starting lineup, no experience or pedigree. They're probably going to be starting a 6th-round pick last year on their interior offensive line, the Lions. Whereas the Packers have depth, offensive line pedigree. They've got everything going for them for their offensive line to maximize continuity even if there is an injury or illness. So the Packers are looking really good at offensive line. There's 2 significant battles, but even if the player who doesn't win those battles is still going to be a valuable backup. Let's go to wide receiver. So one battle that I think is under the radar right now, not a lot of people are talking about it, Romeo Doubs versus Donatavian Wicks. I don't think people think this is as much in play as I really think it is. I think this is an under the radar battle that people aren't talking about, but I expect it will be a thing in training camp. We know Romeo Doubs is a great player when healthy, but injuries are a concern. He's had multiple concussions last year. He's also had 1 game missed due to behavioral issues. So Romeo Doubs, his position on this team is not as firm as a lot of people think. And Wicks is a more explosive player, but he has problems with drops. If Donatavian Wicks shows he can solve his drops, he might be a surprise starter for week 1, and the loser could possibly be traded. Now, I will say, if Wicks does win the starting job over Doubs, I think Romeo Doubs will get traded for a late round pick. And the reason for that is Romeo Doubs is a free agent after this year. He also has injury concerns, which makes him very unreliable as a depth piece. Plus, we know Romeo Doubs has, behavior issues. Last year, he missed a game because he was unhappy with his targets. Do you think he's really going to be viable as a backup player on this roster? I do think Romeo Doubs, if he loses his starting job, will be traded. But my prediction is that Romeo Doubs holds on to his job for 2025. But if Wicks shows improvement, he will be a factor down the stretch. So Romeo Doubs could easily lose some playing time to Wicks. But I also think that Wicks is one of the most explosive players, and that's why he's going to come up in the next topic for wide receiver battles. So the next wide receiver battle I see in training camp is Malik Heath versus Bo Melton versus Donatavian Wicks versus Mecole Hardman for a Christian Watson replacement. So out of those 4 players, the Packers need a player that can take the top off the defense and create big plays and open up the rest of the passing attack. Now, Christian Watson is expected to be back in November, so when the playoffs come around, I do think Christian Watson will be your starter at that spot. But right now, until Christian Watson comes back, they need either Malik Heath, Bo Melton, Wicks, or Hardman to establish themselves as coverage breakers and beaters to open up the rest of the passing attack. Now, Donatavian Wicks, one of his strengths and why I think he might be in the mix for a starting role is the fact that he is the best receiver right now on this roster at getting open. Getting open due to his speed and route running is something Wicks does all the time. If you look at the tape, Donatavian Wicks, if you wait long enough, he will get open more often than not, which makes him a prime candidate to take this job if he doesn't take Romeo Doubs' job. And in fact, this might help Romeo Doubs keep his job if Wicks looks like he's going to be that beater against the defense that we really need with Christian Watson on IR. So that's a really big camp battle that I want you to watch very closely. Mecole Hardman, some people are talking about that he could be off this roster before training camp because of the depth at wide receiver. But he's a proven veteran receiver and a great player on special teams. And that's one thing the Packers would like to improve this year. So I think McCole Hardman has a better chance to stick on this roster than a lot of people think right now. So my prediction is this is Wick's jobs to lose if he does not beat Dobbs in their starting wide receiver question. If Wicks moves to the starting lineup, then they'll need another player out of that group to take this role. I expect now you're going to ask, what about Matthew Golden? What about Savion Williams? I'm not bringing them up in these battles, and there's a reason for that, because I believe Golden and Savion Williams are going to be brought up slowly in this offense over time. They're not expected to be starters. So I think Matthew Golden will be sprinkled into the offense slowly over time with the goal of him starting in 2026. If he's not competing for a starting job in 2025, I don't think that's in the cards. Same with Savion Williams, who I see as a sub-package specialty player with limited snaps in 2025. So everybody's excited about Matthew Golden. I am too. But I think the Packers are making the right approach by bringing Golden along slowly instead of trying to throw him out there and expecting him to be a starter year number one. That is not the Packers' MO. If you look at the Packers historically when it comes to wide receivers with early round picks, they let them develop over time, and in year 2 and year 3 is when they become huge starters for the team. So I expect Matthew Golden to be sprinkled in. It would not surprise me if Matthew Golden had 400 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns his first year as a spots depth piece. He's not going to be a starter unless there's a significant injury. And you don't want to see that. Matthew Golden starting might sound exciting. It might sound sexy. But that means that there's been injuries or underachieving from the veteran players at wide receiver. We don't want to see that. We want to see Golden come in as a change of pace, as a guy with different skill points, have certain packages where you've designed the play to get Matthew Golden open as maybe your third receiver and make big plays. So that's what I expect to see. So my final thoughts on the wide receiver battles. This group was a strength in 2023, but they regressed in 2024. I expect that to change in 2025, given the talent on the roster. And I think that the wide receivers, you could feel it. If you look back to last year, after Thanksgiving, you could feel the wide receivers start to regress more and more as we got into the playoffs. Receivers were dropping balls. They were not getting open. These are things that will change in 2025, and I expect that the wide receivers will go back to having the upside that they had in 2023 in 2025. All right, we got one more training camp battle that I really want you to pay attention to, and this is going to be huge for the Green Bay Packers. Their number one need is to improve their pass rush. If they improve their pass rush, they can make it to the Super Bowl this year. I firmly believe that. So the biggest training camp battle on the offensive line is Kingsley Enagbare versus Lucas Van Ness. One of these players needs to win the job and be a key part of improving the pass rush. So whichever of these two players shows their ability to take the pass rush to the next level will win the job. Now, I've looked at a lot of Lucas Van Ness game tape, and I think he is the player that will win this job. And I think he has the upside to become a very solid defensive line starter. He needs to improve on the run, but all the skills are there for being a very effective pass rusher. He's on paper, everything favors Lucas Van Ness in this battle. So my prediction is Lucas Van Ness will be given every chance to win the job, given his physical skills and his draft pedigree. Van Ness wins the job, and it would not surprise me if Enagbare was traded before the final roster so future picks that are younger and cheaper can stay on the roster. Enagbare will be a free agent next year, And he is a player that on many NFL rosters would be a starter at defensive end. So I expect them to let Lucas Van Ness, barring injury, I think Lucas Van Ness will win the starting job for week 1. And I think Inigbare will be traded before the final roster is set. So that's my thoughts on training camp battles. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed the discussion about what's going on with the Detroit Lions and why the Green Bay Packers are really in a good place to win the division this year from the Detroit Lions. I think the division is there for the taking. If you want to make a wager for the Packers to win the NFC North, do it now, because this is the best odds that you are going to get. So I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about going to training camp. Pack Attack Cast will be there for the first 3 practices of training camp. We will be there for the owners meeting. Love to see you guys out there. And hopefully we can connect for a get-together at those training camp events or the owners event. Very excited about both. Please give us a like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments your thoughts on these training camp battles. Do you think I got it right? Are there other training camp battles that you would like us to dig into in future videos? Put those in the comments and we'll be happy to do that. We'll see you soon for another video. And as always, go Pack Go.